Magic used to be earned. We earned it through study and practice and reverence. Right now, it seems to be mass produced. Like it's filtered and sold back to us as an aesthetic witchy vibe and instant gratification. We're going to talk about this today on Curse Breakers. Welcome to Curse Breakers, where we leverage astrology to empower you, and maybe a little magic too. Hi, I'm Jacki Smith, and I'm here with my co-host and chief astrologer, Storm Sestavani. And this show is sponsored by Coventry Creations, where they have a magical solution to your everyday issue. Let the stars lead you. And speaking of stars, I'm here with my star shiny man, my dear, dear friend, one of my absolute besties. She brings a sparkle to my eye every time I see his number when my phone rings or when the chat pops up and it's Storm. Hey, Storm.
Hey, I'm in supernova mode right now. So
really, tell me,
Yeah.
Tell me about your supernova mode.
Well, the supernova mode has to do with, trying to. There's a lot of things in regards to the medical physical community or the magical community, even the astrological community that I don't know about at this point. And, through my own process of, two things. Okay, running a business. And the other one is my inner growth. I've had to start exploring a lot of different things and, and look at how we're delivering content online and looking at whether or not that we're helping or whether or not we're hurting, Jacki. That's an interesting thing. Are we hurting people at this point, not helping them?
Yeah, I hear you. Because you and I have been talking a lot about, in our personal conversations about our frustration when we see things online that about magic,
right? That
just kind of take the struggle, not necessarily the struggle, but the reverence. That we're 90s witches. I can go back to call myself an 80s witch. I'm a little bit older than you.
If you queue up the KD, whatever her name was, that did that song 80s Ladies from the
So my 80s witch is showing.
Yeah.
So my frustration is when, okay, I'm going to tell you my little story.
Right.
Can I tell you my little story?
Tell me.
So my little story is when a young 20-something was trying to school me on how I should be doing candle magic, on how the things that I was doing was wrong.
Okay, you have to tell me this whole tea, girl. I don't want just
tell
me
I'm
the
not
whole
gonna
story.
I'm not gonna tell their story.
Okay.
I'm gonna just kind of talk about my story.
Okay.
And how from the whole blowing out the candle versus snuffing the candle kind of thing to paraffin versus soy to even how different types of candle magic and the types of blends and the structure of how I'm doing things was wrong because they said because I'm the way they went from that I was having some toxic positivity to being toxic negativity. They went on both ends of the thing. So I'm like I just can't with you. I can't with you. So I was, being very loving and compassionate, and I was being the elder in the moment, and like trying to bring it out, like what's going on, what's happening with you, and they were quoting or referencing. They were referencing different reels that they saw about, like they were mad because I was charging so much money for my product when they felt that they could buy a 25-cent chime candle and do the same thing. That's really the heart of it.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, okay, but hang on. A 25-cent chime candle is going to get you like what, an hour? you're doing an hour-long ritual versus back in the day when all we had were 7-day candles. And it's called a 7-day candle because it's a 7-day ritual that you're doing.
Right.
It is 7 days of commitment and focus and ritual. I mean, like you're coming back to it and you're making sure it's lit and you're stating your intention again and you're doing, I mean, it's a thing. You're diving deep into what's going on in your world and you're paying attention to this ritual and spell that you're casting. You're going to dive into some deep stuff. You're going to go into your shadow side. You're going to do, but why can't you just wrap a basil leaf around that chime candle, wrap a string on it, light it, and win the lottery? I mean, like, because I'm being capitalist and blah blah blah, and I'm like, I just can't, because I've been doing this for nearly 40 years.
Right.
I mean, I'm gonna be 57 this year, which just what?
Okay,
That
you
means
can get coffee for free in the morning at McDonald's.
Seriously?
Yeah.
At 57?
Yeah, 55.
Damn, I gotta go to McDonald's. Anyway, flash my driver's license. Although I might have to show my birth certificate at the same time. Anyway, although I didn't change my
Do you
name,
have
so
a
maybe
real
not.
ID?
I have a real ID. I'll just bring my passport. Anyway, but I didn't change my name, so I might be exempt from that SAVE Act. Anyway, we're not political. I'm backing up. Backing up the bus. Anyway, but I realized I've been doing this for 40 years. I started when I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for 40 years. So I'm an 80s witch.
Right, me too.
So, and back then, there was no reel for me to scroll through 50 different reels on how to burn a chime candle and do a thing.
Our reels, Jackie, were those, you remember those magazines that you used to get in, that would have, and the only reason I got these magazines were, and I even forget what they were called, but they would be like you would get that, when you would contact like one of these, like Llewellyn at that time, you would get this big, huge book from Llewellyn, and in the book would be all of the advertisements in regards to products and all this other stuff to find out, basically what you're interested in. I mean, the Whole Life Expo magazine, and there were like several others out there that at that time, but that was our closest thing to a reel.
The phenomenon news is what we had back in the day, which God love these two women who published this rag, basically.
Right.
It was like a newspaper that came out once a month, and lots of ads, some articles, but this is how we found each other.
Right.
Or we would go to the bookstore and there would be a big bulletin board with, here's the latest meetup. And actually, Dave Linnebury, who is my marketing director, we have known each other that long. We were Coven members back in the day. And how we found each other is I created a meetup. And yeah,
which back then it was not called a meetup, right?
No, it was, well, yeah, no. And so where do you meet up? That was the other thing.
Right.
So I had put
Denny's.
No. You know what I did?
What?
I rented a hotel room at the Knight's Inn. That was like a conference room. I mean, that sounds super sketchy. It kind of was. But I rented you can't see me do the air quotes, a conference room at a Knight's Inn because it was super cheap and super sketchy. And because I said, I don't want a bed in there. I just want a whole bunch of chairs. And I think it was like $70. And I got to tell you, like 45 people showed up.
Right.
It was insane. The amount of people showed up, and it was just, I called it the Witch's Brew, and a whole bunch of people showed up, and Dave was one of them. And when he walked in, it's like we knew each other, and it was great. And super weird, but this is how we found each other, because somebody had to come out of pocket and say,
right,
I'm gonna, and then the UU churches, Universalist, Unity Universalist, whatever, they would allow you to rent their like basements or something. But Yeah, because it was finding a place to meet up that was safe. Um, and the reason why we were at a Night's Inn is because none of the other hotels would let me have a meetup like this. They're like, no, we're not letting you. I mean, they'll let a bunch of swingers come in, but they won't let some witches come in. I mean, just saying. They'll let you have a room party, but they won't let some witches come in. But this is how it was back in the day because we were pretty underground.
Right.
So and then there would be smaller groups that would gather in each other's homes. I know it sounds like so grassroots. It really was. But we would pick up the phone and call each other in the evenings and say, I was just reading about this, or I was reading about that. And we would share books. I mean, it was a
The
big,
few that were available, make that fully understandable. There was not
right.
a lot of books that were readily available at that particular point.
Let's just take this timeline of book availability backwards. So right
right.
now we have Amazon, which now people feel is the devil. And so we have a lot of resources. You can find books all over the place and
Right.
ebooks and electronic books. I mean, anyone can publish anything right now. Before then there was Borders, and Borders had a really decent,
And Barnes and Nobles. Yeah.
and before that was Barnes and Nobles. And before
Walden
that was
Books.
Walden Books, or your local metaphysical bookstore. And if there was one or maybe two in a major city, you were lucky.
Right.
And then how many books could they really have? You know, I was lucky in Detroit. We had a couple of bookstores. One guy, Mayflower Books, he just loves books, and he would have just tons. And so you go in there and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what to touch first. And
right.
Amazing.
Up here in northern New York at that point, Jackie, it was pretty much, I would have to specially order something from Walden Books. Once I got to Los Angeles, to go to college, it was a vastly different experience. And I remember walking into the Psychic Eye for the first time and the Bodhi tree for the first time. And it was like a sanctum. I mean, you were like walking into what was more like could be considered like a metaphysical temple than a bookstore. But basically, that's where all of the stuff was at that particular point.
You know what's interesting back then? I'm reminded when you said that is that you had to step out of your everyday life and step into magic. So when it was time to dive into magic, it really was like almost every time was almost like initiatory. Like, okay, I'm done making dinner and I've done the dishes, and now I'm going to go into my magical thinking. Or it's Saturday and I get to really play with my herbs.
Right.
It's not like you woke up and you could bring your magic with you. You really couldn't. I mean, I had a pentagram that I wore, but it was on a longer chain that I wore deeper into my shirt, or stuffed in my bra or whatever. So because people wouldn't understand, I had different things that I wore that were like symbolic only to me.
Right.
Or different stones, pretty, here's my rose quartz necklace. Hi, but it was because when I took my pentagram out of my shirt and I could be magical, that was part of the ritual. And there's nothing wrong with, I love the fact that I can live a magical life rather than have to stop my life to become magical. I love this today. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love this, but there was something very interesting. There's some great improvements from yesterday to today, but there's just kind of digging into how different things were. It reminds me of, I'm going to step in onto the political soapbox for a second. When I talk to different young women about women's rights or people in the gay community about gay rights and things like that, about how people fought really hard for that it's in most communities, it's okay to be out and gay, or in a lot of communities, you're not as discriminated against being a woman. I mean, although it's coming back, unfortunately, but we forget what it took to get to this place of comfort and acceptance. Did I lose you, Storm?
No. I'm here. You were fading.
Oh, was I?
Yeah.
I'll get closer to the microphone.
No, you were fading as in going in and out like somebody was using a lot of internet.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, hopefully it's recorded better on my end. So back in the day, it was gritty. It was weird. You had to dig in. You had to dig in, and you really had to risk getting it wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think about what is the difference for you? I mean, I just did a lot of unloading. So
I mean, the difference for me, Jacki, is I remember, and you're going to find this hilarious. I remember, and this was the early 2000s. Okay. So I'd been in the industry at this point for a good 10, 15 years. Okay. And I was wandering around. It was before I got full on social phobic disorder, but I was wandering around New York City, Jacki, and I went into a metaphysical bookstore, and I remember looking at candles, and the woman came over and she goes, "Now we do have some edgier ones if you would like to look at them." And I was like, "Okay." So, and she brought me over, and it was a display for the Blessed Herbal candles.
That's so funny. We were so edgy back in the day.
Yeah, it was, these were considered edgy. I mean, and right now you can go and get you let me be a little shady here, a little knockoff at Walmart. But they were, they were so edgy at that particular point. I mean, it's crazy.
Can I take a pause? Not pause the show, but take a pause in our conversation to complain about something. And
sure.
And if we want to eliminate this from the show, I'm kind of okay with that. So I'm very frustrated about a thing, and this is very self-serving in this conversation. So I know what we do here at Coventry. I know how we curate, and it's a little bit of an overused word, but like, we think about what the ingredients are. What does the fragrance smell like? We are really careful on our recipes and how stuff goes in, and our sacred space. And I mean, we just really put it all in our authenticity. We keep, it just really is a big part. We teach about this. And so we make sure that we're walking our talk. And we know what it takes to make the candle a magical candle. And then I go out and I look at somebody who has made something very similar in the similar size. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole story about the Blessed Herbal candle size and how that size of candle mold doesn't exist except for what we created, because it was a PVC pipe in my basement.
Right.
And that's why that size is that size. Like, we created that out of, mother of necessity. It just was the junk in the basement. And so I go out and I look and I see somebody who has made a copy of that, their own version of that in that size. And they're like literally selling it for half price. But then I pick it up and I look at it and I smell it. And I know that they're not doing what we do. They're not educating people. They're not showing folks how to really become magical with this product. They're just putting some wax and some fragrance in a pot and throwing a label on it. I mean, like, I get it. I see it. I've heard the stories about them. So it just really hurts my heart to see that, knowing what we put into it and everything that we do, and how, even to the people who work here, if somebody is kind of toxic or doesn't respect what we do, they can't work here. So it's just very frustrating to see that. I just I just came across that again this week, and it just like almost made me feel like I wanted to give up. Like, why am I even bothering if someone can come in like at half of our price? And we have, and I have some different customers complaining to me that why are you so expensive? These people do it for half the price. And I don't know how they're doing it for half the price. So it just makes, it just, in that moment, it makes me go, why do we even bother? And here's how the universe works. So here's how magic really works. This is me getting paid from all of the magical work that I do and the deep shadow work that I do on a regular basis is before I can even really get too down about it or talk
Right.
about it with anyone too much. I get a phone call from one of my favorite customers and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that I had a customer come in and tell me this story about how amazing this product is and how it helped them. And I want to tell you, keep going and keep doing this." I mean, and I'm like crying. I'm like, "Thank you so much. You didn't know I needed to hear that today." But that's how this stuff really works, because I put in the work.
Right.
And then the universe comes in and smacks me in the back of the head and says, "Don't believe that stuff. Keep going."
Well, I mean that there is a difference, Jackie, between earned skill, which was what we did in the Dark Ages, um, in which you went to a class or you studied something vociferously through spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on books. They were not cheap, by the way. And back then, I remember that it was a big deal, Jackie, being able to make $35 for a reading, okay, for an hour. That was a big deal.
That was a big deal.
And going to Venice Beach, because I lived in California, it was a place where you could go and you could make quick money sitting on the beach, Jackie, with tarot cards. And you could sit down and people would come to you and you would just do readings until, you no longer had any cards to work with because they all blew away.
Was that by where the guys were pumping iron?
Yes, it was right next to it, right next to Muscle Beach. And that's where you would go and you would do readings if you wanted, to make some money on the side. And you may make a big amount of money to make on that beach, Jackie, in one afternoon is like $100. Okay. But that was a lot of money back then, and you would do it for a variety of different reasons. And then, you would get maybe a reading day at either the Bodhi Tree or the Psychic Eye. I worked at the Bodhi Tree for a little while. And then, of course, I was on the first psychic hotline, which was called the Psychic Advisor Network. And which eventually became the Psychic Friends Network. But it was still, I mean, from my particular perspective, Jackie, of being in college and making, $35 an hour doing readings, that was not bad money. That was more than adults were making. Okay. So it was a different perspective, but the whole earned skill of going and doing the work is much different now than what I'm going to call instant access.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to learn a subject right now, all you have to do is pull up a YouTube video. And what kind of bothers me a little bit, Jackie, is that, you don't necessarily know what the source material is of the YouTube video. And it's the automatically, if it's on the internet, it's true philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. I mean, there was, so not every improvement is bad, because back then there was the oral tradition that we were dealing with. Like, I read it in my book, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
which then we're sharing this information orally. And then, you get it wrong. Like, where the hell you get that from?
Right.
And then we learned, like, for instance, we learned that Wicca we were being told that Wicca is this ancient religion, but then we learned later that Wicca was made up by Gerald Gardner. Right. And in conjunction with a few other people. And it's really not that old. And it was what's the word I'm looking for? It was just.
Wasn't the Sybil Leek book published like in the 50s?
Yeah. So it was cobbled together from many other different traditions to bring some stuff back. And hey, listen, I am super grateful for the Wiccan tradition and bringing it back and making it very palatable for a lot of people, and making it, I mean, really was the modern witchcraft movement. Brought it back. I'm not even going to get mad about that. But then when we learned later on, when we had access to more books, I'd like, oh, I get it now, So then we have more and more things to work with. So there's things that, were not perfect. And I don't want to say things were perfect back there. We're kind of doing a contrast and compare of how things were then to how things are now. To get back to what it was like let's stop dumbing it down and let's get back to the things.
My question overarching through all of this, because we are curse breakers, Jackie, is, has magic become a curse?
Has magic become a curse?
And of course, from the one particular perspective, and what I mean by that, Jackie, is that the whole mystery tradition of studying and finding people that had been practicing this for much longer than you, and finding some form of a mentor. Of course, in astrology, I found mine, Liz Green, Richard Idemon, Howard Susportis, that there were several much older authors that I could study from. And, with the advent of the internet, which has been positive in many ways, I was able to take courses from people that I wouldn't have been able to take courses from because they were in England, you know what I mean? Or that they happened to be at a different location than I was.
Okay.
And the difference between that, Jackie, the mystery tradition, and magic now, which seems to be more of a performance art.
So somewhere between the selfie and the spell, we lost the sacred. So I think magic has become a curse when it loses the spirituality, when it loses the spiritual development. So going back to my purpose of finding magic is because I was feeling a spiritual void.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up Catholic, and let me tell you, I loved the spirituality of that religion. I loved it. I loved the teachings of Jesus. Now, I'm talking about the real compassionate teachings of Jesus.
Right.
When I got confirmed in the Catholic Church, I chose the name Magdalene. And they were very confused. They were like, the priest said, "Why Magdalene?" And I said, "Come on, she is the most loyal of all the disciples."
And they're now looking at you, Jackie, and saying, "Now we know why."
Yeah, now we know why. So what's interesting is that they were so concerned about me, they had the bishop come talk to me about that. And so the bishop said, "Why are you choosing the name Magdalene?" I'm like, "Why is this a problem? Magdalene is a big part of the Bible." And I said, "Well, okay. This is me. I think I was 15. Because we got confirmed pretty young. I think I was a freshman in high school. So it's 14, 15. And I said, well, based on what I'm reading in the Bible, because I actually read the Bible when I was young, I loved this spirituality. I should say the New Testament. And I said, well, Magdalene was actually quite rich. If you read in the Bible, in this part of the Bible, she was very wealthy. And she had a great life. As the Bible explained it, she, had it going on.
Right.
And she had the ear of many, and okay, now I'm talking about what I've learned later about Magdalene, but she had a great life. And she was very wealthy, and she walked away from it all to then be considered a whore and looked down upon because she believed in Jesus so much. I think that she gave up more than any of his other disciples. And none of the other disciples would call Mary Magdalene. She wasn't
even allowed to be a disciple.
Right. But Jesus called her a disciple. He stood up for her more, and no one else did. Even though, and he called her his greatest disciple. And the bishop leaned back in his chair when I said this and went, okay, you got it. And so my confirmation name is Magdalene. And I never said Mary Magdalene. I said Magdalene.
Mm-hmm.
They gave her the name Mary. They added the name Mary on later to give it some little, when she became Jesus' disciple, they added the name Mary on there. Before she was just Magdalene. And then I learned later that Magdalene is actually a title. It's a title of a
Right.
priestess. She was actually a priestess. So there's that. And then that's, what I learned later on. But that's spirituality. So there's a little story about me. So that spirituality was always really important to me. But in the Catholic Church, I had no way to explore that spirituality. I loved the magic and the energy of Jesus, but there was no way for me as a woman to explore that in the Catholic Church.
Right.
Like, I don't know if you know this, but the Jesuits explore that energetic stuff
Right.
with Jesus all the time. But there's no way for women to do that I understood at that time. So I'm like, I'm out. So I needed something. And I started learning about metaphysics. And metaphysics is that energy work. But that energy work to me didn't have spirit. It didn't have that connection to the divine. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that connection to the divine. I wanted to understand how the universe works.
Also, Jackie, at that particular point, the languaging skills were limited, and when you would read metaphysical books, even some now, and I have many of them from back in the old day, when you would read them, Jackie, it would be, the way that they were so afraid of calling deity or the source or the universe, or they tried to sanitize away from anything that was closely connected to the word God.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that it was, people couldn't get on board with a lot of it. I remember it was it was so controversial, Jackie, that they had warnings at the beginning of this when Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine, the miniseries aired.
I love that woman.
And yes, because it is my full belief, and people can argue with me if they want to forever. Okay, it's never going to change my mind. I think that the metaphysical community owes that woman more than anybody. Yeah, exactly, because she went out on a limb.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of her that many of us people from back in the old day are even in this industry.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that she gets the respect that she deserves.
No, I mean, she's still kind of considered a joke because she was first. But if you were to watch that now, you would realize how much of a risk she took. And that's what we did. Okay, that's what we did. The risk that she took. Here's a connection of, and I love that you brought up Shirley MacLaine. Her risk that she took is literally the moment of inspiration that helped me that I remembered when I took a risk for those edgy blessed herbal candles.
Right, which were so edgy, Jackie. Didn't you have to go in and make the affirmation line?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
so I could get into different stores.
Right,
because at the end of the blessing on the blessed herbal candles says 3 times 3 times 3, so mote it be, or so mote it be 3 times 3 times 3, because it was very pagany.
Right.
And it scared. And because I had male energies and female energies, and I had all the elements, and is very Wiccan based at that time. Things have changed over the years.
Yeah.
But it was
now they're your soft line.
Yeah, that
the soft, gentle, blessed herbal candles.
Yeah, that I would go into some stores that were more spiritual, white light.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, we're Christian based spirituality here. We don't carry that product line. And oh yeah, I was escorted out of some stores basically. I mean, not like shuffled out, but like no thank you. I actually would send some samples out back in the day because there was no internet. That's how long I've been doing this. It was pre-internet. But I actually had some people send samples back to me They didn't even want them in their store. They
Yeah, they
scare
were
them
that
so
afraid of
much.
them. I
Yeah.
mean, it was considered extremely, extremely edgy. And now that magic has become mainstream, okay, it's why it, and that is where my concern is, Jackie, is have we become mainstream to the point that our original focus, which had to do with how am I going to change myself into a better individual? And we had lovely terms like karma and dharma and uh, so many different, and which have evolved over the many years.
Well, and we also knew what that meant.
Right,
When we used the word karma and dharma or chakras or smudging, we understood its origin. It wasn't this just term like you're saying, the refrigerator.
right. And that is my concern is that now, it seems to be authority now, Jackie, isn't the body of knowledge that you have. The authority now is whether or not you could generate 30,000 likes on TikTok.
Well, and actually, it makes me sad that in the publishing industry, that is part of the qualification of whether they're going to publish you or not. Is they look at your social media following.
Exactly. And
that's your legitimacy, which is interesting because even if you look at social media algorithms now, it's not about how many followers you have anymore. It really isn't. I mean, Gary Vee, who is the guy who knows all about social media,
right.
He says, don't even worry about how many followers or your engagement, because you just keep showing up and with reels and stuff. You're literally pushed into people's feeds.
Right.
So, and it's all about pay to play now anyway.
Right. So everything, and it is very interesting. One of the things that I was making a note about earlier is that I had, my husband watches these very strange, he likes a lot of history type of stuff on YouTube.
Okay.
And he watches this particular guy who's called the Fat Electrician.
Okay.
And he does these history, for example, one of the shows that he did happen to be on why Chick-fil-A is so successful.
Interesting.
And even though I would, I have adverse reactions to going into a Chick-fil-A myself personally and would never go into one, what he talked about was that the reason that they were so successful is because of the fact that their menu was so limited. Okay. You could only go there and get this and this and this. Okay. Whereas if you went to a McDonald's or you went to a Burger King, you're now displayed with 550 options.
Decision fatigue.
Yeah. And you get decision fatigue. So actually going to a place like Chick-fil-A was easier. And he also did one on how Aldi became a store and how it became popular. Well, he did this one and I was listening to it on the side, but I was meant to listen to this part because he basically said he was going on about free products online. Okay. And he was going through, that people, of course, love Gmail and they love Google Docs and they love all of these particular things. And they love Facebook and they love social media and that these things are free. And he said, if they're free, you're the product. You are the product.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm noticing in regards to the magical community and the particular thought process of things like authority being somebody has 30,000 likes. Now, I have to say, Jackie, I'm very, very blessed on Facebook because I have an extremely large following. And I got that large following basically by consistently delivering content every single day. Okay. That's how I got that following. And that content being something that people could use and apply to their particular life every single day. Okay.
That's the blessing of astrology.
And that's the blessing of astrology. It changes every day. But at the same time, people will view that. Okay. And then they will think, oh, well, somebody on TikTok has 30,000 likes. Well, you know what? I'm not going to go do no damn dancing videos on TikTok. And, this is how a Leo is going to dance. I'm not going to do it. It's just not me. But they now believe that that is the authority because they can pull those particular types of views and likes. And like you said, somebody getting a publishing contract depends upon how many likes or how many followers that they have on a particular social media following, not their content. It's, can this be sold? Okay. So it's now about consumerism and engagement rather than actually whether or not that this is a good product or whether or not that this has any form of real intrinsic value.
True. It is like, so what I think what watered down magic is the need for the aesthetic over the substance, of the constant communication, of keeping it. I mean, people started talking about this toxic positivity, which we've talked about before, but that the whole quick, good vibes only 2-minute spells, the quick cash, which of course I have that product,
Right.
quick cash, fast cash, and the instant expert. So the instant expert is something that has been around for forever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nothing new.
We were talking about that on Keep It Magic. I mean,
Yeah.
that was before microphones.
Yeah. So the desire to have instant status,
right,
is like that American dream that you come to America and the streets are paved with gold, blah, blah, blah. But that's something that has always been around. That's been around since since people were selling the special tonics back in the sideshows. So it's always, that's been around since the alchemists.
Right.
So that's nothing new. It's just that it's very easy to hear someone talk about that over and over. So I've been putting together a class,
Mm-hmm.
an online class called the 7 Keys of Attainment. And man, this is deep. This is going deep. It's really about diving into your shadow side, and it's almost ready to roll. And I'm honestly a little worried because it's about diving into your shadow side. There's no instantaneous nothing.
There is. Well, here is the thing. At the end of the day, Jackie, I think that magic is supposed to be liberating. Okay. The reason that you do magic, you can do the fast cash spell from now until the end of time. You're going to have to keep doing them until you resolve the issues that you have with money.
Yep. Yeah.
And at different times and places, we're all going to have issues with money. And I think that the reason that happens is because we have to go in consistently, okay, and look at what our particular views are and what our particular blockages may be. And some of them may be mundane blockages that we've just not considered. And some may be spiritual blockages that we may not have considered. But the only way to do that and get to that root is to explore inwardly what may be causing that process. I mean, that there are a lot of people that have financial issues are dealing with the fear of success, or they're dealing
old
with
legacies and family.
Exactly. Or it is the breaking out of that generational mode, the feeling that one does not deserve, or addiction to things like poverty consciousness. Because if everything in the world, Jackie, is nice and wonderful, and you can just, stick your debit card into a machine and buy whatever you want whenever it is that you want it, what are you then going to have to bitch about?
I want to talk about one thing.
Sure.
Because everything that you're talking about is bringing me to one thing that I think was a blessing and a curse in the magical manifesting metaphysical 3M community. The Secret.
Oh. Yes.
Vision boards.
Yes.
All of that stuff. I think that in some ways made magic approachable to the everyday person.
Mm-hmm.
it made it like, oh, I don't have to put on a pointy hat and get a statue of Baphomet. I don't have to do that. I can make a vision board and manifest something magically. I can, get out my singing bowl and, blah, blah, blah. But I think what happened is that tried to eliminate the shadow work
Mm-hmm.
that witches and magical workers really dig deep and do with the shadow work, the grief, that ancestral healing. And I think that that's what, like, the secret is. If you really think really hard and you say these positive affirmations and the secret was dumbed down. So
Right.
I think that was the big beginning of dumbing it down.
Well, it moved it from the law of attraction, the true law of attraction, Jackie, to the law of distraction.
Oh, score. Say it one more time for us.
It's moved us from the true law of attraction, how to attract something, into the law of distraction.
Amen. Gonna get a hallelujah. I'm over here.
If you start shading in Latin, Jackie, I'm hanging up.
No. But it's like,
if you start singing Ave Maria.
No, but I'm gonna get out a nice deep Southern spiritual in a second. Keep going, my friend. Keep going.
But I think that that's the problem, that, it is the being distracted by all of these things. If, like I told you, my personal belief about prosperity, and I have been very, very blessed by having this particular belief, is having my particular needs met. And if those needs are met and I have a little bit of extra and my health insurance is paid and, I can afford decent food for myself and my husband, then that means that I'm prosperous.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people view prosperity from the perspective of, oh, I have $1 million. Okay. That's not prosperity. That's a check line, in your check register. There are a lot of people that have millions of dollars that are not prosperous. They're not growing anything because they're not growing their life. And the one thing that needs to prosper is not your checkbook. Prosperity needs to start on the inside, not the outside.
Absolutely. It's something that I've been talking about since I wrote Coventry Magic, since before I wrote Coventry Magic. I've been teaching this for a long time, is that, okay, if you want to find $5 on the street, go ahead and light a votive or a chime candle for a quick money spell. But if you want to figure out why you keep having prosperity issues,
right,
then it's time to dig in. It's like, So go ahead and light the stability candle, light the grief candle,
But where my question is with all of this at this point, Jackie, is does the younger generation have the stomach for this type of work? And that's what I question.
I think okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because I don't think it's about younger generation. I think it's about what decade of your life are you in? So, of course, when we were younger, well, I'm not going to say we, I'm going to say me. When I was younger, I wanted to change the world. I felt that the folks that were decades older than me, I'm not even going to say the older generations, but the people that were older than me didn't know how to do it. I had the better answer.
Well, that's been going on since the beginning of time.
Exactly. So, and they were looking at me like, girl, you're going to make those same mistakes I did. So there is, and I'm not even going to say maturity, I'm going to say experience. Right. So what happens over time is we gain different experience. So in our 20s, and I'm going to kind of go from like 25 to 35. So I don't think it's a specific decade. I think it's
we had way less tools, by the way.
Yeah. But, and also there's environmental things, like environmental things there's so many different obstacles that somebody in their 20s today has than the obstacles we had in our 20s. So I just want to honor everyone else's journeys. Like when we were in our 20s, we had our own issues that we were dealing with. And now people in the 20s now, they have new tools. Like different neurodivergent things, different abuse, recovering from different abuse things, recovering from all that stuff. There's better tools now that they were just figuring
Right.
out when we were younger. I mean, that's another show. I'm going to stop talking about that. Psh. So I just want to honor.
That's another show.
I just want to. I don't want to say you kids today are stupid. I want to honor you that you have a different set of circumstances than we did.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're better or worse. I don't think this is a competition. What I think is like from 25 to 35, a lot of times you're experiencing parts of adulthood for the first time. The first time you're going to be late in rent or having to sign a lease agreement or interviewing for a new job or getting fired from a job or having a breakup of an intense relationship, or all of these things are firsts.
Mm-hmm.
There always has to be a first. And that first is mind blowing. Okay.
Right.
You don't know how to deal with it. And you're surrounded by your friends who are also having their firsts. And you also don't necessarily believe people who have been through it a dozen times, because a lot of times the folks that are in their 50s who've been through this a dozen times are going to look at you and go, "Oh, baby, look at you." And they're going to be assholes to you. And I would like to apologize for everyone who's an asshole to you. I might have done it myself. Then when you're in like your 35 to 45, it's not your first anymore and you think you got it. So now you're in this energy of, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to show you, and you've got a ton of energy and a ton of power. Like you're in your heyday, man, I'm going to make this shit happen. So you got a ton of energy. And then when you hit the 45 to 55, you're like, I got nothing to prove anymore. I've been through this a couple of times. I've been around the block a couple of times. I'm just going to, instead of proving myself, I'm just going to start to be myself. And then you hit to like the 55 to 65 and you're like, I am so sick of you. I am sick of you people.
It's time for me to retire.
I am so tired of going on this spiral, this loop-to-loop, this roller coaster, and I'm done with this struggle.
Right.
You know, and then you get in the 65 to 75 and you're like, yeah, it's always a damn struggle. So whatever. And every thing in your garden has been pulled up and given away. So anyway, I'm just trying not to swear, but every fuck in your garden has been pulled up and given away.
Right.
So I think in these different decades, we're going to have different experiences. And so there's nothing wrong with being in the different places in your life. And so I think in this process, so when we were in our 20s decade, we didn't have access to the same thing that folks in their 20s today have access to. I remember I wanted to learn about different ancient deities and stuff. And there's not a lot of books on this. I wanted to learn how people really did things back in the day. So you know what I did?
Right.
I got art books.
Right.
I got books on ancient art. And I learned more from that than I did from these scholarly texts. Because number one, scholarly texts are really boring.
The books that we read were very, very boring.
And they pontificate, and they really like to hear themselves talk about things. But art books are way more interesting.
I think they like to read what they wrote. And if, the more flowery and unrelatable, the better.
Right. And so.
But it was considered the truth, with close quotations, the truth.
Yes. So I think that one of the things that is missing right now in this whole process is going back to actually studying, taking classes with people who have more experience than you, rather than taking classes with people who are fresh off the boat like you are. Hang on. I want to erase that term because that's a horrible racist term that I can't believe that's still part of my vernacular. Rather than taking classes from people who are at the same skill level as you.
Right.
Who are fresh into that knowledge that you are. So getting books that have bibliographies that show their sources.
And there's so many now that are being published that do not have a bibliography. That is scary to me.
Yeah.
Especially in the magical community. I mean, they're the worst offenders.
Hey, listen, pro tip. If you're using your AI or your chat GPT, ask your AI for its sources.
Right.
And have it link direct information to its source. And then you can make sure it's not hallucinating things. And then go look up that source. And then the other thing that I think when I'm talking to different people that is missing from some practices, not all practices, but from some practices, is the actual practice. So what I see is the continual hoarding of knowledge,
mm-hmm.
and the lack of actual activity.
Right. Magic needs to stop being content and start being a catalyst.
Right. So there's so many things that I do not put on my social media, not because it's super, super secret, but because I'm just kind of busy doing stuff.
Right.
And I, you know what? Maybe I should share my failures more. I mean,
I will tell you I've posted before, and this is the most hilarious thing, is I posted an article a couple of years ago, Jackie, on horary charts that I got wrong and why I got them wrong. Crickets. But if I post one that is Ask Storm, is my boyfriend coming back to me? Too many likes than I want.
That's funny. That's real. Because here's the thing is we in the Instagram world where we see the perfect meal, the perfect outfit, the filtered face.
Right.
We forget that life is messy.
Right.
Life is really messy. Magic is really messy. I gotta be honest with you. Right now, I'm really messy. In my life in this exact moment, I'm really, really messy. I'm experiencing a huge shift in my industry. I'm experiencing a huge shift in the retail world. I'm experiencing a huge shift with these tariffs that are affecting me and every other small business. So be gentle to your small business owners. And it's affecting every area of my life. And it's really messy. And so I am getting into my magic. And you know what? A lot of it's feeling like it's falling short.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a little truth telling, a little transparency here. As I'm doing some of this stuff and it feels like it's falling really, really short. Like, are you kidding me? This isn't working like it used to. What's wrong with you, universe?
Right.
And then getting mad at my spirits and stuff, my ancestors for not helping me. And then realizing, oh, wait, they are helping me. This is just a really big ticket. And
right.
If I was doing nothing, I would be in way worse shape. But it's messy. I'm like, literally, there's candle wax everywhere.
Well, you also have to remember, Jackie, when things are going really, really well for people, it is our human nature not to make changes. If it's working, why fix it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it is usually when, and of course the world moves too quickly at this particular point to necessarily have that particular philosophy. You need to be looking at now, where do you want your business to be in 5 years, and make your decisions based upon that, getting to that trajectory, rather than looking at the immediate future. And that particular mindset shift is very hard to wrap your mind around.
It's hard to wrap your mind around when you're looking at how am I going to put a chicken in the pot today?
Right. It's very difficult.
And you have to think on multiple levels at the same time. And that's messy. So magic isn't just for like manifesting the chicken in the pot today. It's about mourning why their chicken isn't in the pot. It's for reckoning as to why you got nothing but bones.
Maybe you need to become
chickens.
a death doula, Jackie. I mean,
maybe. But
there's a lot business path.
There's magic has a lot of layers to it, and it's not sparkly. People think magic is very sparkly, and it has its sparkly moments. And it also has its really muddy, ugly moments. You know, who said that? Was it, I can't remember his name right now. Churchill said, when you're walking through hell, keep going.
Right.
You know, you don't stop. I mean, that's only a piece of the quote, but the magic is about understanding that I'm walking through hell. So I'm going to pull magic in and energy in so I have the energy to keep going. And to rise, to continue to rise. It's a slow practice. It's really a slow thing.
It really is. I mean, and that's the main thing is that people, I think, need, if they would spend more time. My advice to the people that want to do quick and easy magic, and that's fine. I'm not going to judge it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done it.
But if at the same time they spend 5 minutes and say, what is the underlying reason of why I have to burn this quick cash spell?
Yep.
Or why do I need to do a love spell to bring somebody towards me? What is the underlying reason underneath this? And start to explore, even if just for 5 minutes, the what is going on underneath the surface. I think that it would expand their magic exponentially. Small changes lead to big results.
I agree with you 1000%. And I look at my physical health, my emotional health, and my spiritual health at this, and my spiritual health being my magical health, the similar ways. Like, okay, my physical health, am I taking my vitamins? Am I eating the right food? All that stuff. Like, you have a cold, so you take your cold medication, and then at the same time you think, all right, am I doing the things? Am I eating the food that keeps me healthy?
Right.
That kind of thing. Or your emotional health. It's like, all right, I'm feeling really sad today, and am I doing the things that help keep me emotionally balanced? Spiritual / magical health. Okay, I won't need to do this quick fix on this thing. And what am I doing in the long run? Am I taking my spiritual vitamins, as it were? It's very similar in the whole thing. I think that's an article. I'm writing that down.
We're at the end, Jacki. So you can write that down. People, make sure that you go over to CoventryCreations.com. They are the sponsor of this show. And also in your show notes, you're going to see links to a calendar. You can download that straight into whatever calendar you use, whether it be Google, whether it be Apple. It doesn't matter. You can download it into your calendar. And also hit like.
Oh, wait, what does that calendar give you?
It gives you the astrological stuff for every single day. Okay. All of
Do you know that mine alerts me every day?
Yeah, mine does too. My watch alerts me every day.
I love it. I don't know how that happened, but that's a new thing that I made happen, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, my watch, Jacki, will tell me when the aspect is happening.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, it is kind of.
I didn't know how I did that. I'm excited about that.
But I write these every single day for every single day, so make sure that you can go and get them. Okay. And we are changing the format of it soon, so it's seasonally based, meaning whatever zodiac season that we're in. I just uploaded the new one to Jacki, so that will start in Cancer season. Because I do write them a little bit in advance. So that we have time to prepare them. And also hit the like button if you like this episode. Share this if you want other people to hear it, or if you know just one person you feel that can get meaning out of this particular show, give it to them. Let them know it's there. Let them know we're here. And Jacki, where can they find you?
Oh, you can find me on all the socials under Coventry Creations or Coventry Candles. All that stuff. I mean, we're even on Blue Sky. We're getting fancy over here.
And you can find me at Storm Sestavani pretty much everywhere except for Facebook. On Facebook, I'm facebook.com/astrogossip because I like to talk about astrology. And what do they need to do in the meantime, Jacki? Until they hear from us again, whenever that may be.
Keep it magic and keep that magic deep.
Yeah, keep it deep. Speak life, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.